So, hey, welcome to Physics 12. During this course, as I mentioned last year, we will use models, often mathematical, to help us understand a particular set of phenomena, to help us figure out what's going on. Again, I need to mention these models will almost always be wrong. We'll ignore friction, Hannah. We'll ignore air resistance. We'll simplify, but we'll be close. And sometimes we'll be really close. They'll be good approximations. So I do need to emphasize that I'm doing bad physics most of the time. I'm giving you a best case scenario if we ignore a bunch of the yucky math. But since our models are mathematical, good math skills are very helpful. Here is a review, and last year was weird, so I put hopefully, of some math skills. One of the things you will need to do this year is to solve a quadratic equation. What is a quadratic equation? How can I glance at this equation and instantly tell you that it's a quadratic? Yeah. More specific. What is the exponent as a number exactly? Squared. Quadratic. If I see a squared and nothing bigger, that's a quadratic. Okay? It's an equation. I see two sides of an equal sign. Okay. How do you solve a quadratic equation? There's something you have to do first. I call it step 0, and the reason I call it step 0, there's a pun or a memory trick there. What do you have to do first to solve a quadratic? What's step 0? Yeah, Camille. You have to make it equal to 0. Step 0 is you have to make it equal to 0. There's two ways I could do that. I could plus the 2 over, or I could minus the 5t squared and minus the 7t. Either of those are fine. I will usually try and make the quadratic term positive, and that's just because over the years I've learned, Denzel, I'm much more likely to make a dumb mistake if the quadratic term is negative, and I've gotten good at formula manipulation. I can move stuff back and forth in my head. So you might see sometimes, Mr. Duke, you moved 2 things over. Yeah, I wanted to make the quadratic term positive because it was creeping me out. But here, I would plus the 2 over, and so I would rewrite this as I would write that down. And that's all of you. Arch, you okay? Good? Okay? I would write that down. You all had me last year with one exception, and you might recall I used a phrase, lazy but organized. I want to solve this. I want to be organized, but I don't want to write a bunch of stuff out. What do you do next? Who remembers? You got the step 0. That was good. Who remembers? Caleb is clever. I saw him glancing at his formula sheet. I don't know if he was glancing intelligently, but that was smart. What do you do to solve a quadratic? You learned a special thing last year. I think is how it went. What was that? Okay, you could try factoring it. I'm going to tell you this year, if we're using real world physics data, they won't factor. So don't even bother trying. This one does because I made up a nice one because I wanted the answer to work out evenly. But we're going to solve this as though you can't factor it. What did you do? You learned a whole new trick last year. Did you not learn a formula? A quadratic formula? Which went, who remembers the quadratic formula for a candy? I'll give you a hint. It went x equals. Yeah. Oh, did I give it to you on the formula sheet? I did. Maybe you want to find where the quadratic formula is on your formula sheet so you know where it is. It's probably on the back page because I also put a bunch of trig stuff there, I think. Max, can you read me the quadratic formula, please? Okay. Many of you might have memorized it last year. It does have kind of a flow to it. x equals negative b plus minus square b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. If you can say it faster than that, can you say it backwards? a2 overall ca 4 minus square b root square negative plus b negative equals x. The quadratic formula, when I taught math, I used to say it was the iambic pentameter of mathematics. It was the poetry of mathematics because it's the only one of its type. There is no cubic formula. We looked. There is no quartic formula. We looked. There's no to the fifth power. We looked. In fact, for about 300, we've known about the quadratic formula for going on 1,000 years. For about 1,000 years, mathematicians were looking for other formulas, and it was only in the mid-1850s that a mathematician proved the quadratic formula is it. There are no higher degree formulas. So it's special. Do you need to memorize it? No. But do you need to know how it works? Yeah. What does the lowercase a stand for in my equation here? By the way, kudos to you that remembered how to factor, because I'm impressed, but they just won't factor this year. I'm not going to try and make fake numbers up. Was that a hand up, Sophie, or not? Okay. I'm lazy, but organized. Typically what I would do is I would go like this. If your teacher last year taught you to go somewhere and you feel more comfortable writing that up, go ahead. But I always figured if I just labeled it above, I was good. In fact, if I really wanted to be paranoid, I might even do that just so I know what goes with what. Then, until I got good, I wrote out the quadratic formula as is. I unusually did not try putting numbers in right away. By the way, it's not x equals. This one's going to be t equals because we're solving for t. If you put x equals, Ethan and I won't take marks off. I'll just probably put a frowny face and say, hey, you're solving for t, right? And I would write negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. I usually extend the square root and put a little drop down mark so I know that's the end of the square root. All over 2a. And then I would usually put an equal sign and plug in the numbers. What's negative 7? Oh, negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 5 times 2 all over. And then because I can multiply anything by 2 in my head, even if it's a yucky decimal, I would almost always do the 2a in my head, just a habit. You don't have to. But by doing that, it allowed me to type less brackets when I was going to my calculator, and I'm naturally lazy. My next step was usually to just crunch this. Who remembers what we call that thing inside the square root? We have a fancy name for b squared minus 4ac. It starts with the letter D. It's the discriminant because it discriminates. It tells you what kind of answers you're looking for. I'm not going to be fussy about that in Physics 12, but I would often go to my calculator and just go, okay, 7 squared minus 4 times 5 times 2. Oh, 9. And so I might write on the next line, negative 7 plus or minus root 9 over 10. And usually on this stage, I would go to my calculator. Is this a fraction? So I'm either going to hit the fraction button or brackets around the top. I don't need brackets around the bottom. I can't do plus or minus at the same time. So on my calculator, I would go bracket 7 plus square root of 9. I know that's 3, but if it didn't work out evenly, I'd just put whatever b squared minus 4ac worked out to. I have to close off 2 brackets because my square root opens up a bracket as well. Divided by 10. Oh, not 0, Mr. Duick. 10. Did I make a typo? Yeah. I did make a typo. Thank you. Candy for you since you spotted a mistake. And one of my answers is negative 0.4. And then this is one of the main reasons I told you last year to get a calculator, let you backspace and edit. because it lets you then backspace and just change the minus sign, the plus sign to a minus sign, and save yourself a lot of typing. -1. If you don't have a built-in solver, you have to be able to solve a quadratic and get it right all the time. Telling you right now, there's going to be a question for 7 marks, yes, 7 marks on your test, that's going to require you to solve a quadratic to get the right answer. Now, if you have a built-in solver, I'll show you how to use that in a second. Okay? Let's do another one. B, solve that. What kind of an equation is this, and how do I know? It's a quadratic. You know how I know? It's got a square. What's step 0? Make it equal to 0. I'm going to minus the 12t over. So I'm going to go 4.9t squared minus 12t. Technically minus 0. If you feel like you have to write that so you can see what C is, go ahead. Caleb, I'm lazy but organized, so I don't do extra writing if I don't have to. And I would make a little note, I guess that's A, that's B, and I guess C is 0. T equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. What's -12? Ronan, can I get the mask up and over? Thanks, kiddo. 12? Yeah. Plus or minus the square root of -12 squared minus 4 times 4.9 times 0 all over. You know what 4.9 times 2 is? The acceleration due to gravity. This is why I said they won't factor, because usually A is going to be a half of -9.8 if we're doing real world questions. And 4.9 doesn't factor with much. Hey, last time I crunched this, I did it in 2 steps. Let's see if we can actually do this in 1 step on our calculator. Let's get our calculators out. Is this a fraction? Yes, for those of you that have the fancy fraction buttons, hit that. For me, I've got to open up a bracket. I'm going to go 12 plus, and I'm going to go square root bracket. I'm about to make a mistake. See if you can spot it. You see it? Yeah, what? If I type this, my calculator won't know that that negative in front of the 12 is also supposed to be squared. So I have an option. Sophia, one way to do that would be to put a bracket there, and a little bracket there. Or I'll often just forget the negative, because I know when I square it, it's going to vanish, and then I don't need to put the brackets there. But if you've typed this incorrectly, you should get 2.4489799592. If you didn't get 2.4489799592, either I've made a typo, which I might have, but more likely you've made a typo. Let me double check. Bracket, open a bracket, close off the square root, close off the top. I think I'm right. How many of you got that? Okay. Okay. So let me write this down. I'll go to, I don't know, 5 sig. I'll go to 4 sig figs. So 2.449. What was your question? Wonky? Is it working? Am I right? I don't know. We're going to find out because we're going to do this with your solver if you've got a built-in solver too. Then I should be able to backspace and change the plus sign after the 12 to a minus sign. And I get, another root of 0. Which, by the way, I knew was one of the answers, so I'm pretty sure the other one's right because I couldn't have fluked into this answer and not got the other one correct. All right. Who has a solver? Okay. Who isn't sure and would like me to look at their calculator to see if they have a solver? Let me pause the video lesson. Solve this one. Pardon me? By the way, if you're paying really close attention, you might notice I'm actually doing d equals VIT plus a half AT squared with numbers. Our initial velocity is 12 meters per second. The acceleration was negative 9.8. And, we're ending up 10 meters below from where we started. How would I solve this? What's step 0? Yeah, and this is where Mr. Dewick does his weird thing. I would actually plus that over and minus that over because I hate the quadratic term being negative. That I've just learned is when I make dumb mistakes. So I'm going to rewrite this as positive 4.9 t squared. Take away 12t, and then the minus 10 just drops down like a domino. Then I would go, hey, that's A, that's B, that's C. And if I had a quadratic solver, which I normally do, I'm done. I'm going to my quadratic solver. Now, about half of you don't have a quadratic solver, so here we go. I wonder if we can plug the numbers in without writing out the quadratic formula, because I have the quadratic formula on my formula sheet staring at me. So let's see if we can go straight to plugging in numbers. T equals, what am I going to write now? What's negative B? 12. Plus or minus the square root of B squared. I might be tempted to be lazy and write 144 because I know that negative 12 times negative 12 is 144. Or I might at least chuck the negative knowing that I'll write it, but I won't type it on my calculator because the negative is going to vanish. Minus 4 times A times C. And then I would extend the square root like that just to let myself know that that was all in the square root. All over, and again, you can write 2 times 4.9, or you can write 9.8. Is this a fraction? Yeah. Lyle, you ready? We'll type this together because I also have a TI. Is this a fraction? Is there more than one thing on the top? Oh, yeah. So open up a bracket. Then I'm going to go 12 plus square root, open up a bracket. Mine already did open up a bracket for me when I hit the square root. I think yours probably did too. I'm going to ignore the negative because the negative squared is just going to vanish. I'm just going to be lazy and type 12 squared because I'll get the same answer. Minus 4 times 4.9 times negative button 10. Now what, Ethan? I got to close off the square root. I got to close off the top fraction, divided by, and then 9.8, or if you left it as 2 times 4.9, open up a bracket, 2 times 4.9, close off, times 4.9, close off the bracket. We should have the same answer of 3.10602, that. For those of you with the solvers, am I right? Solvers are so much easier. You're starting to see why I went on my rant last year? I would, because this is a time value and I'm usually using this to find other stuff, I'd go to 4 or 5 sig figs. So I'm going to say t equals 3.1060. How do I find the second answer? I backspace. I think on the TI, it's second function equals, we'll backspace. I change the 12 plus to a 12 minus. And I also get negative 0.6570. Now, if this was time, if we were using physics numbers, which one of these would I chuck? Yeah, time can't be negative. And so in math, there's always two roots, two answers to a quadratic. In physics, we would say, we'd ignore the negative sign. And you know what I'll do just to make people happy? Pardon me? You need to be more specific. This part here, the negative squared part, or what I would do then is I would go like this. So I'm ignoring the negative value because negative time doesn't make any sense. Specifically for time can't be negative. Velocities can be, displacements can't be. So if I was solving a quadratic where I was finding a velocity, or if I was solving a quadratic where I was finding a displacement, I'd keep a negative value. But I know time as a scalar, it's got to be positive. Is that right? Okay. Try this one on your own. If you have the solver, use it. If you don't, I'll do it up here silently. Those of you that have solvers, double check and see if I'm right. And feel a little superior to your poor neighbors who have to type all this. All good? You got a solver? Oh, okay. You've been done for a while then. How many you got that okay? Okay. There's going to be some practice in the homework. So, in theory, that was review, but some of you might have seen it last year in the fall, a year ago. And who the heck remembers stuff from a year ago? Formula manipulation. This is a good skill and will save you lots of time. Get the A by itself in your head. Alessio, talk me through it. What's going to drop down like a domino? Yeah, the D is going to drop down like a domino. Then what? Yeah. Remember, it was reverse BEDMAS, so you actually did your dividing last, almost always. You did your multiplying last, almost always. You did your adding and subtracting first. Oh, and if there was something in the brackets, you dealt with it last, because it's reverse BEDMAS. Is that okay? The D would drop down like a domino. Then you would minus the C over, divide the B squared, and that would leave the A by itself. Remember that? Good shortcut. Hey, let's solve this for T if VI equals 0. So if VI equals 0, what's 0 times T? That whole term would vanish, and you would get a special subcase. Or last year, I often wrote it as those two were interchangeable. Max, how would I get the T by itself? Which one do you want to use, the one on the left or the one on the right? This one? Okay. How would I get the T by itself? And I'd usually make it a 0.5a. I'd have T squared, how to get rid of a squared, square root. Or if I was doing the right-hand one, I would times by 2, divide by a, square root. Those are identical equations. How would I get the E by itself? This one's a bit trickier. Why? Denzel, where is the E right now? Yeah. Can't do stuff when it's on the bottom of a fraction. So, any suggestions, my friend? More specific, you're on the right track. So, that E, where it is, I don't like. Dividing by E on the right-hand side is the same as doing what with the E on the left-hand side? I would go like this and put the E there. Now it's on the top. Now that only works when you have one fraction equals one fraction. But I think I have one fraction equals one fraction. A yucky fraction equals a yucky fraction, but okay. Now how do I get the E by itself? Can you talk me through it, Denzel? How to move the A squared over? The A squared is timesing the E right now? Okay, so the D would drop down like a domino. I would divide the A squared over. What about the BC? Times it over. That equals E. In fact, if you really want a handy hint, and we'll use it quite often this year, if you have one fraction equals one fraction, like that, you can move terms diagonally. In other words, A squared over BC equals D over E. I could also write that as A squared equals BCD over, I can move the BC up diagonally. I can move the A squared down across diagonally. I can move the E, up across diagonally. Stuff moves diagonally. That can be handy this year, because we'll have a couple of big fraction equations this year. If you want to get a head start on the homework, the questions you're capable of doing right now are starting at number 9 and following. And there's room if you write medium small to do this right on the sheet if you want. We'll do a review of trig next class. You really want to see, that's tomorrow, you really want to see if you have your actual calculator, if possible, by then, your regular calculator by then. What's the block order tomorrow? The D. In other words, when do I see you tomorrow? After lunch or last block? So don't be late. Okay?